Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing great. With that said, I have some interesting stories for you all to listen to. And if you guys do enjoy, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, enjoy. Sorry for my English. I tried to transcribe from French to English as best as I could. 2 years ago, I met a guy on Tinder. Good feeling from the start. We quickly decided to each text each other. He asked me to come and sleep at his place, which I accepted because we had mutual friends. I told myself that he was definitely someone that I can trust. I arrive at his house at 9 p.m., and I immediately see that he's not as I imagined. He looked dirty. His apartment looked like a squat, and there was a smell of stale tobacco in every room. I see a stack of books on autism. When I come into his home and I ask him about it, I learned at this moment that he is autistic with Asperger's, and he has difficulty understanding right from wrong. He also tells me that he knows how to analyze nonverbal language very well, and that he knows what a person is thinking just by their attitude. I don't know anything about neurodivergence, but I directly wondered what his inability to recognize right from wrong meant. He offers me a glass of alcohol, which I accept, and as I follow him into the kitchen, I see a weapon placed on the counter. I'm a little panicked when I see this, and seeing my look, he explains to me that it is not charged and that it belongs to his father. I never knew if it was a real weapon, but I'm starting to get a little uneasy. On Tinder, he told me that he wrote quite a bit, like me, so he shows me a poem he wrote on his computer. He recounted the rape of a child in quite precise detail. I freaked out. I pretended to appreciate his talent, because he was really scaring me. We then talk about his ex, and he tells me that they had fun choking and drowning each other in the shower because they wanted to know what it felt like to have control over the other's life. It was too much. I had swept away a lot of red flags in just a few hours, but I just wanted to leave. Problem? I had to sleep at his house, so I had to find a plausible excuse to leave without him understanding that I was fleeing the situation. I was afraid that he had bad intentions and would come after me if he understood that I was afraid, and that I had understood his little game. I discreetly sent a message to my father with the address so that he can come pick me up immediately. I explained to the boy that ultimately I couldn't stay, but that I was really disgusted at not being able to stay longer. I played the hypocrite to perfection. At that moment, we were both in bed and I was just looking at my phone, waiting for only one thing, to find out when my father was going to be there. At one point he asked me if I'm in a hurry to leave, because he notices that I look at my phone regularly. I was scared, because I remember him saying he knew what a person was thinking just by his attitude. I told myself that he was going to take action if I didn't hide my fear. I managed to make him believe, at least I had the impression, that everything was fine and that I was in absolutely no hurry to leave. He offers me a massage, which I try to refuse, but not wanting him to understand my discomfort. Especially since I was soon out of trouble, I accept. I find myself in my underwear, him on top. It was horrible. Just as he was about to touch my chest, my phone rang. My father was in front of his house. I get dressed quickly and barely say goodbye to him as I leave the apartment. I sent him one last message, explaining that I didn't want to follow up because his behavior really freaked me out. Then I blocked him. One of my friends matched with him on Tinder a few days later. He'd offered to come and sleep at his place. I warned my friend who didn't follow up on this guy. I don't know if he was just weird or something, but something could have happened to me. But be careful on Tinder. You never really know a person. Good day, everyone. I decided to go ahead and make this account to type the story out and get sucked into the rabbit hole that is this app. I don't know if I actually avoided something sinister for a fact, but I'd rather play it all safe and say that I did. I'm a 29-year-old female, and while I'm well-traveled and I have been around quite a bit, I do occasionally make some pretty rookie mistakes. My fault, and I make no excuses. I try to remain diligent and alert, but I'm very capable of letting my guard down. So after being here in the US for about 2 months, I decided that I was bored sitting around my unit, watching 90 Day Fiancé. So I decided to make the old dating profiles again. I made no specific intentions known about what I was interested in accomplishing, as I don't really know myself. I just wanted someone to hang out with and see where it goes naturally. I ended up matching with this one bloke who had shared interests with me. We chatted a bit over the app, and eventually I felt okay to give him my number. After talking back and forth for a couple of weeks, I agreed to meet up. We met at a pub and I had a couple of drinks. I'll admit at first, I didn't recognize him because he didn't resemble his photos to the extent that I was expecting. He didn't look bad by any means, but I could tell that he used older pictures and edited them enough to where he seemed more appealing. I swear, I'm not trying to sound superficial, because he was cute, just not what I was expecting. But I also think we've hit a point in social media culture where it's safe to assume that we won't see the same thing in real life as we do online. And that's okay. We did hit it off. We discussed the usual first date stuff. Then we got into more detail. I told him about back home and work, and how life was different there than in the States. At one point we were talking and holding hands, and I felt comfortable enough to let him kiss me. Well, he asked me as we were leaving if I wanted to go back to his place for a cup of coffee. I told him I knew what coffee really meant, and I didn't want to do that on the first date. He assured me it would be 1 cup of coffee and that he would give me a lift home, so that I didn't have to call an Uber. I accepted his offer and we walked to his apartment, which was a few blocks away. As we were going upstairs, he made a few questionable remarks. He mentioned how I wasn't like most girls because I accepted his invitation and alluded that, you never know, I could be a psychopath. He then motioned with his eyes down to my dress and inquired about my titty size. I told him again that I was sorry, but that night would not end with him getting lucky. As we got into his unit, he dismissed himself to the toilet and left me sitting on the bed. It was a studio and he didn't have a couch. As I'm sitting there and waiting for him to finish doing whatever he was actually doing, I noticed in the corner by his bed that he had 2 masks. One was a cartoon-looking goat mask, and another was a cat, or maybe a tiger. What was more alarming was that he also had a Bowie knife and a small woodcutter's axe, only a short distance away from them. Upon further observation, I also noticed there was a black jumper draped over a dresser. Then on his bedside table, there were a pair of latex gloves. Yawns. Okay. I just don't much feel like being murdered tonight. I got up and calmly left that unit. Then I made haste down the stairs and down the street, where I was able to catch a lift. Now look, I may have just really hurt his feelings, because he had no malicious intent, but if that's all that happened, then I prefer that over the possible alternative. All of these items alone wouldn't have been that bad, but all of these random items within a short walk from each other, I'd rather just not chance it. I do feel bad for leaving a person, but I don't feel bad about leaving what could have potentially been a dangerous situation. That along with his random personality change was enough for me to make that call that I made. As of recently, I noticed that he either blocked me from Tinder or deleted the app. Thanks for having a read. I hope the weekend finds you all well. It's hot, so please drink heaps of water, stay safe, and lots of love. So, the story started when I was 14. I'm 17 now. So I used to play in the park with my friends. I had a crush on a boy who was 14 as well. He used to play with us, and he too had a crush on me. And he had a friend who was older than him, 16 to 17 maybe. So we all used to play together. I always saw my crush's friend as a brother, but his feelings for me were not appropriate. He liked me, so one day on my birthday, he randomly approached me and told me that he loved me. I replied that I did not have the same feelings for him, and liked someone else. He did not take the no as an answer. Now that's when the creepy part started. I recently joined his Instagram, and somehow he found my Insta ID, and began messaging about how he loved me. I rejected it multiple times, but he just won't stop, so I blocked him. Now he started making multiple Insta accounts to stalk me and message me from each one of them, and I kept blocking him. I was annoyed and enraged at this point, and threatened him that I would report him to the cyber police. So he took it up, being his ego and kind of started following me at places. He would take the same route as mine, knew the timings about when I was going to the park, when I was going to buy groceries. So whenever I went out of the house, he would creepily stare and continue ogling until I was out of his sight. He won't even budge his eyes for a second. When I used to play, I stopped playing with him, but he continuously roamed around me and stared. Now I was scared to a point where I started hesitating to go out of the house. Whenever I saw him, my heart would drop. I started hyperventilating. I thought this was only me who found him creepy, but when my mom was like, "Who is that guy who always roams around you? He doesn't give me good vibes. Try to stay away from him." I was like, "Yep, he is bad." And you know that? The person is not very good if your mother's instinct seems something fishy. This went on for a whole 2 years, and his staring or messaging and stalking from fake accounts didn't stop. He even went to the extent to manipulate a friend of mine and my crush, whom I started dating, that I was a slut. We didn't break up though. That's when I had enough and decided to take action. I went straight to that bastard and slapped him right into his face. To this day, whenever I hear his name or see his picture, I get panic attacks, and my hands and legs start shaking in fear. In fact, he was sexually attracted to one of my friends and asked her if he could see her breasts. She was too scared to do anything to him, or tell any adult. I, 25-year-old female, had an experience about 4 days ago that I haven't been able to shake. I was dog house sitting for my boyfriend, 26-year-old male, while he was away on a backpacking trip. My boyfriend's home is in a semi-remote area at the bottom of a hill, at the back of a few arches of property. He's right next to the highway, which is opposite to a small rural neighborhood. It's both very sketchy and very safe, meaning that the community is close, but people frequently keep themselves, and there are lots of abandoned, dilapidated homes right next to very well-kept homes. A pretty typical countryside neighborhood, so I really don't feel unsafe to agree to watch my boyfriend's property and his dog, Hennessy. Hennessy is a 115-pound jet black American Bulldog, English Labrador mix. He's basically all muscle, and ever since my boyfriend and I began dating, he's become very protective of me and my own dog, Lottie. Lottie's a 57-pound poodle mix. I'm a dog groomer, so she's usually done up in pretty silly haircuts, with bows and everything. All this is to say that one of my dogs is very intimidating, and the other is not. Because of his strength, however, I cannot walk Hennessy and Lottie at the same time on my own, and so I usually walk Lottie alone, then go back and get Hennessy to walk him alone. We do about 30 minutes of walking each, and I like to take Hennessy after Lottie at night, because I feel safer with him as it gets later. This is important because this was the case about 4 nights ago. I was about 3/4 of the way through my walk with Lottie when I got this really weird feeling that I was being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I looked around to see that about 30 feet or so back, there was a tall man in a hoodie standing next to an older, run-down home. I instantly thought the hoodie was weird. I live in Northern Carolina, and it's early August. It doesn't get colder than 87 degrees in the evening, especially when the sun was still setting like it was at this time. I forced myself to brush it off, as I tend to be fairly paranoid due to my years of reading Let's Not Meet stories. As I kept walking, the sun kept setting and the streets began to slowly get darker. I would glance back from time to time and notice that the man was keeping pace with me, not breaking that 30-odd foot distance. If I turned a corner, so did he. If I sped up, so did he. Finally, we reached the highway, and I crossed right before a car came speeding past, hoping that if the guy was following me, this would put some distance between him and myself, which it did. But that didn't stop him from continuing to follow me, as I walked as fast as I could to the house, not wanting to turn around, but now being able to hear his footsteps on the gravel. At this point, Lottie had noticed him too and started to bark and growl. I forced her to keep moving and thankfully made it back inside the house, slamming and locking the door, hoping that was the end of it. It was not. Moments after I shut and locked the door, I felt someone trying to open it. The dogs heard this too and started barking because they always do when someone's at the door. There's no peephole on my door, but I can talk to whoever it is on the other side. It's a pretty thin door, so I yelled out and asked who was there. Through the barking I could hear a man's voice. "I love your dog, can I meet her?" For some reason, the way he said it was so creepy. It was like there was nothing behind it, kind of like he rehearsed a line or decided to say it beforehand. I yelled back, "No," and asked him to please go away. He paused for another second and then again said, "I love your dog. Can I meet her?" He starts trying the door handle again, this time pushing up against the door. By this point, Hennessy can tell something is wrong, and so can Lottie. The hair in the back of Hennessy's neck is standing up, and he's gnashing his teeth while growling. At that moment, I don't know what possessed me, but I threw Lottie to the bathroom behind me and grabbed Hennessy by the collar, keeping him closer to the door with me. He's still barking and going crazy. I hear that man repeat that he wants to meet my dog, and I yelled out, "Leave!" He paused and then slammed into my door. I see the door move, and at the moment, I unlocked the door and opened it, just wide enough that Hennessy could get about halfway out. He's going bonkers at this point. My hand is starting to hurt from holding him back. I can hear his teeth clacking and is ferociously chomping towards the man. Well, this dude was not expecting Hennessy. He stumbled back, almost falling over, and cursed as he scrambled to stay off the ground. He didn't even look at me and instead booked it up the hill as fast as he could and out of sight. I managed to pull Hennessy back in and called the cops to tell them what happened. I never got a good look at the guy, and they basically told me there wasn't anything I could really do. But they did take my statement and told me they could contact me if anything ever came of it. I'm so thankful for Hennessy. After all of that, I snuggled up with him and Lottie that night and cried because it had all hit me. How terrifying that was. I literally went out the next day and bought him the biggest bone I could find from a pet store, nearly an hour away, because he earned it. I also got Lottie something too, lol. I don't know why this creep didn't get the hint when I had two dogs barking inside, but my assumption is that he didn't really realize he was hearing two barks, or assume that if I had two dogs and they were both like my puffy poodle, that is to say, he wasn't afraid. I'm so thankful for the guy that didn't have a firearm, and looking back now, I probably should have just called the cops and kept my door closed. But I hope that maybe because he saw Hennessy, he'll know not to come back and mess with us, because if he does, I'll let my big sweet boy rip his arm off. Thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed all those stories. With that said, as always, stay depraved.